God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. To follow along with the visuals of this podcast, please visit the video podcast on Substack at The Cancer Goddess, Annie Appleseed Conference 2025. Hello, my name is Vera, meaning truth in Latin or faith in Russian. So, staying true to my name, I'm going to give you the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. I learned while recently attending an Ayurvedic hospital in India that in order to truly understand a patient and their disease, you must understand their whole story, starting before birth. According to the seed soil theory and metaphor, the soil that you come from greatly impacts the seeds and growth that occur. Damaged soil can lead to damaged growth. Although I had damaged growth, I will tell you my story and about how I healed 4 cancers in 5 years. 2019 bilateral breast cancer, BRCA1. 2021 brain tumor, the size of an organic strawberry, from the original cancer. 2023 leptomeningeal disease. It's when cancer gets into the meninges of your brain. And then 2024 thyroid cancer. In 2023, after the brain cancer metastasis diagnosis, I was given months to live and put on hospice. But instead, 15 months later, I'm here talking to you. People call me a miracle. But what is a miracle? Well, according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, it's an extraordinary event taken as a sign of the supernatural power of God, an extremely outstanding or unusual event, thing, or accomplishment. If I am truly a miracle, then how did I come to be that way? And how can that miracle be replicated so other people can also have those miracles? That's why we are here, right? To inspire and experience miracles. So let's rewind to learn about how this miracle occurred and how to cultivate that for yourself and for your patients. I grew up in Miami in a dysfunctional home with lots of yelling. My father was a genius whose potential was never actualized because of his own battered ego and inferiority complex. Instead, he targeted those around him, coworkers, family members, but mostly my mother. My father belittled and verbally abused my mother because she was an easy target. The fighting was mostly around finances and spending. In the rooms of recovery, they say that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. The more my dad yelled, the more my mom shopped and sunk into her own neurosis. This dis-ease of not enough started young for me. I wanted what they had, the nicer car, the nicer house, the family that didn't fight all the time, etc. I sought solace through these uncomfortable feelings through escapism, first through food, then TV and movies. I too wanted to play a part and be someone else. But due to overeating, I became chubby and was bullied in elementary school. My self-esteem plummeted. It was acting that helped me regain my confidence. Then I discovered dieting and exercise. I joined a gym at 12 and started going to Weight Watchers meetings with my mom. I became popular and had my first real boyfriend, Jose, who ended up breaking my heart. Thanks, Jose. My mother fostered my desire to be an actress, just like my sister. And after my sister left to New York City to attend film school at NYU, I could no longer be with my parents alone, or I was at risk for DCS, which is the Department of Child Services, to get involved because the fighting became untenable with my mother. I had become like my father, using my mother as my own emotional punching bag. So when I was 14 years old, I ran away from home to live with my sister in New York City. I attended LaGuardia High School of the Performing Arts, started smoking, got addicted to drugs, alcohol, food, relationships with men, and bulimia. My root chakra was unstable, unrooted, and damaged from my own family drama, in addition to deep generational trauma. It's too much to go through now, but I speak extensively about it in my first Cancer Goddess podcast. Hence, the multiple addictions and extensive need to fill a void in a God-sized hole that no person, food, or drug could do. But I didn't know this at the time. I just sunk deeper and deeper into depression and dis-ease, culminating into an unstable root chakra that led to many addictions and difficult emotions that I was too young to process. Then I went to college, basically cheating my way in. I got a full scholarship because after emancipating from my parents, I became a ward of the state of New York. Picking colleges was like eeny, meeny, miny, mo. But the saying goes, wherever you go, there you are. I was still bulimic, drug obsessed, boy crazy, but I recognized this was an amazing opportunity, and I learned how to be a student because that wasn't happening after leaving home at 14. I was too busy partying at clubs, working to help pay the rent, getting high in Central Park, or sleeping over at my boyfriend's house to care about how to write a thesis paper or how to read at the college level. However, despite the monkey of addiction on my back, I thrived academically and fell in love with academia, anthropology, psychology, and documentary filmmaking, all of which I still do now. I moved to Cambridge, the epicenter of all things academic, and after struggling with bulimia for 8 years and a constant barrage of drama and stress that culminated into depression, psoriasis, and self-hatred, I finally hit rock bottom. I became desperate. I was at my heaviest and scraping the resin from the pot pipe to get high. Another saying in the rooms of recovery is that the willingness to make a profound change is the gift of desperation. It's the same willingness to change when it comes to cancer healing. At 24, I was willing to try a new way because my way wasn't working. The premise of all 12-step programs is healing from addiction. People call the one I joined the Cadillac of all 12-step programs because they put down all drugs, including caffeine. In addition, processed flour, sugar, alcohol, nicotine, and anything mood-altering, including, in my case, relationships with men. It's hard to recover from addiction alone, so there are a lot of tools and steps to help one along the way. 12 steps to be exact. I will outline the first 3. 1. We admitted we are powerless over blank and that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity.
And 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood Him. So there are basic tenets of the 12-step program that I'm a part of for food addiction. And I can't tell you what the program is for the sake of anonymity purposes, but if you really are interested, please send me an email at vera@breastcancergoddess.org, and I'll get you plugged in to all the avenues to explore it. There's meetings online, and it's a very, very powerful, beautiful community that I've been a part of for 21 years. So the basic tenets are, number 1, no processed flour or sugar. We weigh and measure our meals. There's no eating in between meals. You have 3 meals a day, unless you have a medical issue, like my case sometimes. You have half hour of quiet time daily. Quiet time, meditation. We use the word quiet time because meditation can feel dogmatic and have an expectation, but there's no expectation in quiet time. You just sit quietly with yourself and your head for a half hour, and that is the journey in itself. You have a sponsor. That's somebody who guides you through getting to this place where you can let go of flour and sugar, which is so addictive and causes extreme weight gain or restriction, or in my case, bulimia. So the sponsor helps guide you and gives you a food plan to help you. And you talk to that sponsor every day in the beginning. It's like you're carried, because I don't really know any other program or diet that can carry you like this. Because when you're letting go of an addiction, you need support. You need to call people on the telephone. And it was a huge part of my recovery from food addiction and cancer healing, just being able to talk to people who empathize and then can tell me their issues and their stories, and I can get out of my own ego. Meetings, going to meetings, listening to people talk about their recovery, talking to them and hugging them and having real connections, so powerful. Gratitude, a life of gratitude is a beautiful life. And service, we do service to help the suffering addict because someone did service to me. My sponsor did so much service for me by taking my call every morning, starting when I was 24 years old up until now. And so service, giving back, sharing your experience, strength, and hope is how we stay abstinent. And of course, anonymity. I will not say the name of the program because that would be a break in anonymity. But if I can shout the name of that program from the rooftops and put it on billboards and t-shirts, by gone it, I would. But I'm not. But if you really are interested, please send me an email at vera@breastcancergoddess.org, and I'll get you plugged in to all the avenues to explore it. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming regarding how, despite the odds, I became a 4-time cancer survivor.
But as hard as it was, because when you put down one drug, such as flour and sugar, another desire can pop up and render you naked with fear and dread. And as much as I wanted to run away, like I did in Miami, I didn't. I stayed and worked on myself, spiritually, mentally, and physically, via intensive study of the 12 steps. And the miracles started to happen. Things that I didn't even think were even possible for me. I got married, I had 2 children, became a yoga teacher, became a high school media teacher, started a documentary film company, and received my master's from Harvard University, just to name a few. I was the pinnacle of health and serenity among my friends and family. And then I got cancer at 39, when my children Asher and Alma Vida were 6 and 4. By the way, they're going to love that I mentioned their name here. I discovered the lump while I was breastfeeding my daughter Alma. I thought it was a blocked milk duct. I led such a healthy life in recovery. Why would I have a tumor? I was beginning my journey, so I didn't know about thermography, which is a non-invasive way to check for cancer in the breast or body. So I opted for a mammogram to appease my mother, who kept telling me to get one. I was resistant, but finally did. And they squished my breast like a chicken cutlet, and I thought, my God, there's got to be a better way. I remember it like it was yesterday. My husband was traveling in Saudi Arabia making a documentary, so I was alone with the kids. However, I wanted to know the results of the scan, and I didn't have time to find a babysitter. I also kind of wanted them to be there as an emotional support for me to get out of my own head and ego, no matter what the diagnosis was. Good idea and bad idea. The nurse informed me, after waiting what felt like an obscene amount of time in a small hospital room with 2 kids under 6, told me rather coldly that I had cancerous tumors in both breasts. At this age, my kids' lack of empathy to understand what just happened and constant need to focus on their needs allowed me to sublimate my own feelings in that moment. However, after leaving the hospital, I turned to a puddle of tears and called my 12-step recovery sponsor. After that, I got a fine needle biopsy and ultrasound that eventually revealed that I was stage 1 and stage 2. There were too many red flags. I was young, healthy, and active. So the doctor ordered a genetic test. We all know that only 5 to 10% of breast cancers are hereditary. Could I be part of this unlucky lot? I'd never had a form that had a box for Ashkenazi Jews. Usually, it's the standard boxes: Caucasian, African American, Native American, Asian, but Ashkenazi Jew? I went into detail about this and generational trauma of the Jewish people, but it would take too long to explain here. So please reference my first posting and podcast on Substack at The Cancer Goddess about generational trauma, the seed to soil theory. I will be sharing my entire cancer journey there. Now back to our regular scheduled program of surviving 4 cancers. After 3 weeks, I received the results from my genetic testing and was positive for the BRCA1 gene, which stands for BR, breast, CA, cancer gene. Women with this gene have a 45 to 85% chance of developing cancer in their lifetime. My grandmother died of breast cancer and my father of pancreatic cancer, but that was not on my Ashkenazi side. Rather, it was on my Sephardic side. More on that in the Generational Trauma podcast. Tomato, I was still diagnosed with cancer. And there was a part of me that was relieved because maybe it wasn't something I did to cause. I was part of the few that inherited it. But I am learning, as we all are, that genetics are not the only factors that can spark cancer in the body. You can still have a hereditary disposition that can be compared to kindling when starting a fire. But it's your environment, behaviors, and daily actions that can spark the flame. This was my first cancer rodeo, so I was taking everything in. But like a research project, I decided that I would document my experience along the way, doctor visits, surgeries, etc. The first picture I took, I wrote on my chest, "Breast cancer doesn't own me." If you are listening to this podcast, know that there is also a picture and audio vision where you can see the pictures of this journey on my Substack at Breast Cancer Goddess. I made a decision at that moment that no matter what I would endure during my journey, it would not define who I was. This is just a new experience full of insight and learning that I can share with others who are facing a similar path. Kicking and screaming internally, I agreed to do chemotherapy, as I was already firmly based in a natural healing lifestyle. At this point, I had been in recovery for 15 years, became a yoga teacher, mindfulness educator, and worked for a big essential oil company. At one point, I had become one of the top salespeople. I branded myself as Voracious Healing, which means true healing, sharing my recovery from food addiction in general, and elimination of all things toxic, mind, body, and spirit. So I was not too keen on going through chemotherapy, which I now learn can cause secondary cancers. But the doctors were very convincing, and one of my earliest oncologists said, Quote, "If you were my daughter, this is exactly what I would tell her to do," unquote. This dilemma caused immense consternation between my husband and I because I was so resistant to following the conventional doctor's orders. At that point, I didn't know there was another way, so I did the toxic, hair fallout, make you sick chemotherapy called adriamycin cytoxin, aka the Red Devil. I just realized that the name cytotoxin has the word toxin in it, just spelled differently. After that, I took the drug Taxol. I also did the cold cap, which freezes your hair follicle, so you lose way less hair. Your head is frozen while you get chemotherapy, so it's completely relaxing. Just kidding. Many women want to do it and save their hair, but find the process too uncomfortable. I developed tricks and tips along the way that I will be revealing in this memoir. Taxol felt like a walk in the park compared to the Red Devil. However, COVID times hit, and I no longer had friends or family to accompany me to the treatments. So I was rendered solo, getting toxic juice pushed into my veins. My way of dealing with the heavy feelings about it was by sharing and educating others through social media. And of course, connecting to my fellows in the recovery program on the phone. Regarding the reconstruction, after some research, I opted to do a deep reconstruction, which is a very involved surgery where they took the fat from my stomach and made a boob out of it. Incredible Frankenstein stuff. This was the fun part of breast cancer. My initial interview was with an uncomfortably handsome doctor, an artist named Derek Reformat, Cambridge Hospital. Love the name Reformat. He couldn't do the surgery alone, as he was a solo operation. The easier surgery of putting muscle in place of my boob, tram surgery, was a morbid option, according to him, because I was so young and active. So I was referred to an esteemed plastic surgeon named Dr. Samuel Lin and his team at Beth Israel Hospital, Boston. I couldn't wait to get the deep. I was beyond excited to remove the stubborn fat from my stomach and put it in my boobs. One of my favorite memories was looking through his booby book. It was the best shopping experience I've ever had. Initially, I had opted to do the deep and the double mastectomy together, as they both are major surgeries. However, since it was COVID times, deep was considered non-essential surgery, so I had to wait. I did the double mastectomy, DMX, because that was considered essential surgery. During the surgery, they removed my port. A port allows for the infusion to go directly into the body, sidestepping the veins, which can cause wear and tear. And after removing the port, expanders were inserted. The expanders hold space for the deep to come, or implants for others, but some women also just opt to go flat. Once the DMX is over, then they take the cancer specimen to a lab where it's chopped up and analyzed. After the double mastectomy and deep, I received an immense amount of support by way of meals, finances, comfort from friends and family. I can't stress the importance of setting up a care bridge or GoFundMe by a friend or family member. It was beyond helpful, and I am so grateful for the folks that showed up for me. Anyway, back to the cancer and chopping it up. It turned out after my tumor was properly dissected, I was no longer HER2 negative, but rather HER2 positive. HER2 positive is a way more aggressive form of cancer that would often lead to death, especially before the approval of the miracle drug Herceptin in 1998. So the certificate of chemocompletion that I received was rendered null and void. Now I had to do more chemotherapy, no longer in the port, but in my veins. Again, I kept documenting my journey, and I was beyond grateful for Herceptin at the time. Perhaps it could have saved my grandmother's life, Matilda Algranti Ventura, who I never met but was an extraordinary woman. Herceptin gave me some minor side effects, but nothing compared to the dreaded Red Devil. Fast forward to 2021, when I was growing my hair back and detoxing from the chemo through avenues I learned as a holistic health advocate and coach. I also continued to teach yoga, but at the height of COVID, we went to Miami to escape Boston, where it was cold and people were afraid of even being on the same sidewalk with children. I started having shooting pains and thought it was due to sciatica, which I had during my pregnancy. But it got worse, and I was having trouble loving life. I wanted to die at one point because the shooting pain was so intense, which is so not like me and freaked out my husband. While in Miami, I saw a chiropractor and an acupuncturist, still thinking it was sciatica. I would get momentary relief, but the shooting pains would come back. Eventually, I couldn't eat anymore. I was bedbound, so my husband rushed me to the emergency room on the coldest night in Miami, where iguanas were dropping from trees. It was like Grand Central Station, as a lot of people were experiencing emergencies that night. All I could do was lay on my husband's lap. I was totally out of it. After many, many hours, we were finally seen. My brain was scanned to reveal a tumor the size of an organic strawberry, lodged into the back of my cerebellum. They wanted to do treatment fast because it was fatal, according to the doctors, but we declined because we didn't have insurance in Florida, and my care team was in Boston. We called my amazing traditional oncologist, Dr. Gerber Wolf of Beth Israel Hospital, and she arranged a brilliant neurologist to take my case, Dr. Rafael Vega, Harvard Medical School, and Beth Israel Hospital. Much to the dismay of the many doctors and residents present for my case, they gave me steroids, wished me luck, and we signed ourselves out after booking a flight to Boston ASAP. That night, I said goodbye to my kids, not knowing if I'd ever see them again. The next day, we ate at a Cuban restaurant, because if I was going to die, well, at least I'd have a good meal. Then we jumped on a plane and prayed that I would stay stable on steroids. Thank God I did. And I was deposited to Beth Israel and said goodbye to my husband because it was still the height of COVID and he was not allowed to join me. I kept my mind off the situation by working on a friend's video for a fundraiser. Later that evening, I had a meeting with the esteemed Dr. Vega, and his bedside manner was very, very comforting. I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the effect of, "It's going to be a pain in the ass to get, but I can get it out." I cried with joy. It was a 7-hour surgery, and I was sitting up the whole time, unconscious, of course. Then I did the CyberKnife, a radiation device that delivers targeted radiation to get to the residual cancer. Operated by a radiation oncologist, Dr. Lauren Herten. Now, instead of breast cancer, it was now brain cancer that didn't own me. See the picture? Then I had to get a shunt installed because the cerebral spinal fluid, CSF, wasn't draining properly, and that was a whole drama. Despite the hardships of a brain tumor, I got through it, many say with unshakable grace and resilience. So I rebranded myself, instead of Voracious Healing, to the breast cancer goddess. I was so turned off by the whole fuck cancer and cancer sucks ideology and movement. Instead, I saw cancer as a great teacher, fluid that you can dance with and learn from. I studied Indian goddesses in college and was fascinated by their diverse power and myriad identities. Why not become like these fierce goddesses when walking through cancer? It seemed way more feminine than the masculine cancer warrior who is encouraged to beat, slay, or battle cancer, implying that you must obliterate the enemy. But in most cases, cancer is not always the enemy. It's an alarm bell, alluding that something is not going right in your body. It can be a friend warning you of something more serious. So, rebranding myself as breast cancer goddess, I started to coach other emerging goddesses. I also joined the Mindfulness Lab at Harvard University under the direction of esteemed professor Dr. Ellen Langer. Her 45 years of research show that where you put the mind, the body will follow. It was during this time that I started coaching a particular breast cancer goddess who started teaching me about fasting during treatment and detoxing with enemas. She had virtually no side effects from chemo. I was floored and wanted to learn more. The greatest teachers are the best students, right? So in 2023, after branding myself as a 2-time stage 4 cancer survivor, feeling great, helping others, still teaching yoga, I was rendered in shock when everyone in my family got lice and I got brain cancer, aka leptomeningeal disease, which is when cancer takes over the meninges of your brain. The meninges are 3 layers that cover and protect your brain and spinal cord. Not the kind of news you want to hear. Furthermore, I was blamed by some of my doctors for causing the spread because I went off meds, like Lynparza. One doctor told me not to Google it because it was such a dire prognosis. And I didn't until after I was healed. Then I learned that a patient is given months to live. The traditional Western medical model didn't have a clear drug or solution. There was no cutting it out. It was more chemo, whole brain radiation, and fingers crossed. It was at this point that I took healing into my own hands and decided to call a friend who I met at a park in Miami while our kids were playing soccer. Lucky me, she also happened to be a naturopathic doctor. At this point, every time I would see her, I would pick her brilliant mind about all things cancer. It was like getting a crash course in healing cancer naturally all to myself. I was obsessed with learning and learning more. I recorded our conversations. I would make a point to meet her in the park and walk around the track, listening to her and recording her every word while our kids played. She was the first person I thought of when given the news of the dire prognosis. I called her in tears, in front of my children's school, desperate for an answer, desperate for a solution. In her heavy Croatian accent, she said, "Stop eating and start juice fasting, but only green juice with no sugar for at least 30 days, maybe more." So I did. And I documented every day of my journey. Because I had to for my own sanity. Raising kids, being a mom, and fasting is no easy feat, but I did it. With the help of my recovery program, friends, and my higher power. I also documented someone fashionable every day as well, as it made the day more interesting and fun. You can follow that journey on my Instagram at Breast Cancer Goddess, or coming soon on my Substack at The Cancer Goddess. And it was the most amazing and hardest experience of my life. I also continued to do all the healing things while I was fasting. As a result of letting go of processed flour and sugar at 24 and not eating between meals for 19 years, green juice fasting wasn't as challenging as I expected it to be. Here's the analogy. When you train for a marathon, you can't expect to hit your running goals right away. No, you have to train to get there. That's exactly what my 12-step program for food addiction was. It was a training ground for this ultimate pursuit of survival. There's so much research that explains why my naturopathic doctor led me in this direction, as well as my own research and learning. This made the experience all the more meaningful. I was very influenced by Dr. Jason Fung and Dr. Pradeep Jamandas, with over 10 million views on his video about fasting for survival. The first 30 days went well, and I felt no symptoms of brain cancer. So then I ended up fasting for another 37, in total doing 67 days until all came to an abrupt halt. I tried to integrate food in the Dominican Republic. I was there because I wanted to immerse myself and my children into a Spanish-speaking country so they could learn more. They go to a bilingual school. I had planned the trip before I decided to fast. However, it wasn't the greatest idea, as my cleaned out and sensitive gut was no match for the microbiome of the food in the DR. After one attempt to juice, I fell very ill and had a hard time eating the rest of the trip. As a result, my body and energy was slowly wasting away, and the activity in my brain began to appear again. I was dizzy and could barely eat. I was skin and bones. It was a miracle that I made it back to Boston by the skin of my teeth, and I was rushed to the hospital. I was only 90 pounds. They wanted to put me on hospice, as they had little hope that I would make it through alive. But I wasn't ready for that. I remember making a video, barely any life in me, but expressing that I felt belittled and infantilized by the experience. I warned the cancer goddesses watching not to let anybody infantilize you, ever. Dr. Gerber Wolf rolled the dice and started me on a drug called Enhertu by the pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca. And I started getting treatments and had tremendous support from my social media community, recovery community, friends and family. The generous support from my friends allowed me to hire a nursemaid for almost 4 months. She helped me so much, especially with my kids and the physical demands of life we don't often think about. Walking up and down stairs, going to the bathroom, eating, cooking, cleaning, getting into cars. Initially, I was in a wheelchair, and then I graduated to a walker, then a cane, then I was known as Wibble Wobbles, as a good friend would call me. Every month there was a significant improvement, and continued to educate others along the way of my recovery. Then I relaunched Breast Cancer Goddess as a nonprofit because in all that amazing advice and support from my naturopathic doctor, get this, she never charged me. Never. In return for that gift, I vowed that the life-saving cancer healing information that I received should be available to all, no matter what their financial situation. As long as a goddess truly wants to heal from cancer, the information and support will be available. So let's go back to that word miracle. Yes, it's our connection to the divine, but also endless education, strength, and resilience along the way. It's doing all the healing things all the time. That's what a goddess is. That's my approach to healing cancer, like throwing gluten-free spaghetti to the wall and seeing what sticks. It can all work, especially if we believe it to be. Thank you for listening about my 4-time cancer journey. If you would like to learn more, please visit www.breastcancergoddess.org. You can also support my digital memoir and podcast by going to Substack at The Cancer Goddess and becoming a paid subscriber, as I've yet to pay myself for the work that I have done setting up this nonprofit to help others. I appreciate your generosity, and I appreciate you sharing this with as many people who can benefit from it. Thank you so much. Love and light, Vera.